Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining in to this call. Realize everyone got pretty short notice of this, but just wanted to get everyone together and give a quick update of some things going on at the Institute, talk a little bit about where we're at, further introduce myself, and kind of set the stage for some upcoming events. So just a couple of programmatic things up front. We have, over 100 folks, well over 100 folks signed up for this. So everyone has been set up to be on mute as soon as you came in, so there's no background noise. So if you have a question, please make sure to put your questions in the Q&A section such that they get represented, so the folks from our team that are reviewing them can pull them down and then pose them to our team as we go through this discussion. So my intention is to give a relatively brief update of a couple of things going on, talk through an opportunity that's in front of us, and then spend some time walking through any particular questions. All of this is intended to be the start of a discussion. Hopefully, I know a number of the folks who are on the phone are going to be at TRX next week as well, so happy to continue discussions after this, and obviously those that aren't, we can pick up discussions as well. So we'll just make sure to put your questions into the Q&A section. So we're gonna get started. So this all really started back about a month ago. I took over the role of Executive Director at the Institute. For anyone who isn't aware or didn't know, that transition hopefully has been relatively smooth in that I had been with the organization for many years, serving in the role of Technical Director for the last, I guess, almost 5 years. So I'd sent out a notice to the community and introduced myself, and as part of that, many folks had reached out about, wanting to get more engaged with the Institute, wanting to learn more about, or maybe get re-engaged. So folks that had been engaged before had worked with us in some capacity and wanted to talk through ways to get reconnected to the Institute or get connected. And that led me down the path and a lot of internal discussions at the Institute around, what we can do to make sure we're connecting and staying as engaged as possible with the community, realizing that our opportunity to really make true impact against the mission would be to work more closely and continue to work and then work more closely with folks to execute against the specific mission of the Institute. So, that then led me down the path of trying to think through ways we can start opening up more lines of communication. And one of the things that led us to, and really is going to be an area I'm going to focus on over the coming months and year, is working through ways to get connected. And I think the best opportunity we have to do that, to truly make some impact and knock down some of the barriers preventing true adoption of the technology, is to do that through partnering and exploring partnerships and understand what that might look like. So, bottom line up front of this introductory talk in general is, we want to explore and are very interested in increasing partnerships, understanding how to better strengthen our member relationships, and that can come in through a wide variety of ways, from formal agreements where we may decide to go work on something together, or, your organization or group may want to lead a particular activity that's of particular interest to the Institute at large, teaming up on events and executing events with and on the behalf of the Institute and the community, talking through how to further deploy the AM ecosystem to make a broader, more national impact, all while addressing, different gaps that we've identified, and all of that through, technical gaps and education and workforce development gaps and standards and policy, regulation, trade opportunities, And as we walk through all of those different opportunities, we're quickly reminded that there's absolutely no way this can be done without using the membership and taking advantage of this great community that we've had built. So if you can go to the next slide, Joe. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes just talking through, and I'll say recommitting the Institute's position and what we're looking to do and continue to do moving forward. So the Institute's core mission is it really has one singular objective, and that is to advance and accelerate the adoption of additive manufacturing, 3D printing technology. And we do that overall through three kind of core pillars of activity, and that's development of additive manufacturing technology, accelerating human capital, and developing the people, if you will, and maintaining and building the collaborative ecosystem. So as you can imagine, each one of those core, those pillars has a number of different activities that are broken down inside of each of them, and we know that none of this can stand on its own. And hopefully none of this is new information or terribly different than anything that we've done in the past. It's just really a recommitment to our core mission and wanting to continue to execute against advancing and developing the technology. So that's working through project calls and identifying project calls and topics of most interest, and doing that through road mapping, such that our roadmap is ultimately driving the activity at the Institute. That is only made valuable if we have a workforce that can take advantage of the technology. So continuing to work in developing the workforce and developing skills across the entire education and workforce development continuum, so that we have the right people in the right position to take advantage of this technology, and all of that while building the supply chain, so that we have organizations in place to take advantage of all of this and really position and continue to position the U.S. in an area where we're able to show leadership and be first out of the gate in the technology as much as possible. In areas we're not, obviously work on accelerating that. Next slide, Joe. So all of that is, really enabled through three core functions at the Institute. Those three core functions are, executed through our operations, technology, and communications. And you see that, and hopefully have seen that over the years. Operations plays a big component to what we do and have done. Those of you that have been involved understand that we have a rather large project portfolio and have over the years. So this includes execution of that work, making sure that we're executing project work on time, on budget, doing, managing risk, et cetera, and making the right calls as we invest money for the Institute against a particular plan that is developed as topics are developed through the roadmap, et cetera. At the core of what we do and have always done is really the technology space, and that is both technology development and technology transition. So, and we absolutely know that you can't have one without the other. I think lots of us are really good at the technology development side of things, but unless we're able to continue to transition it and actually disseminate it down to the folks who can take advantage of it, think back to the supply chain that I mentioned earlier, the better we're able to do that and the better we can do that as a community, the more opportunity that creates to the community at large, and ultimately the more that continues to grow and grow, such that we're able to achieve the true impact and opportunity that the technology has been able to present to us, and we know where it can really go. But without being able to disseminate that, we continue to lag our ability to implement that technology. And the last piece of this is really around communications. And we've put a lot of energy into communications over the years. There's a variety of different ways that we try to communicate with the community. Lots of opportunity to continue to do that in different ways. And it's an area that we also know that no matter how good the work is that you do, if the folks who make decisions don't understand it and don't know about it, you're not going to be able to really see the benefits of it. So, we put a lot of energy into communications as a core function, and we'll continue to do that moving forward. Next slide, Joe. And finally, as I kind of wrap up, I'll say just initial discussions around, or I guess recommitment to the Institute and how we're approaching our portfolio as we're approaching managing and executing the Institute. You can think of us in this relatively simple way, and that is a convener, a coordinator, and a catalyst. And we've talked and utilized this language for I guess almost 2 years now, maybe a little less than that. But I think it really sums up what we're trying to do at the Institute, and ultimately what any organization like ours and the other Manufacturing USA institutes are trying to accomplish, and that is bringing folks together. This is not folks from America Make sitting around trying to decide what makes the most sense, but instead a collection of members being pulled together, understanding what the various needs are from the various stakeholder groups, and determining what those technical challenges really look like. And we've spent a lot of energy in taking that information and coordinating that information as we collect it from members against a common language, against a taxonomy, if you will, that is the roadmaps that we've worked on over the years. And we have a number of different roadmaps, as you know. But we've seen the impact that you can make if we start talking in a similar language, and we will continue to do that moving forward. And the power of being able to coordinate that information is then you can take the next step, which is prioritizing what needs to be done, who needs what portion of the community is in need of a particular advancement, and how do we try to catalyze activity around those particular needs, and how do we identify what those high-impact projects look like. And we've done quite a bit of that over the years, and we understand the different project calls that have taken place. What I want to transition into next, if you can go to the next slide, Joe, is talking about some of the ways that we're wanting to do this in the future. And this is really where the conversation changes a little bit. I'm going to now talk about an opportunity and where we're at as an institute, how we're looking to move forward, what that ultimately can mean for all of us, the community at large, including membership and our government partners, and set the stage for where we're at, where we're going, and ultimately what help we need. So we are at the point right now where we're effectively in the next phase, or starting the next phase of the Institute, if you will. And not that that's any formal transition or anything like that, but it's just where we're at. We spent time through the first cooperative agreement. We really put a lot of energy into establishing the Institute, building it out, creating all the procedures and process and structure and project calls and all of those kinds of things. And then in Cooperative Agreement 2, spent a lot of time executing, and that really was testing the system. And Cooperative Agreement 2 really focused on execution, and that was running a number of different project calls and projects through the process that existed. Cooperative Agreement 3, which is where we're at now as we propose moving forward, is a combination of those two. So it's really continuing to execute and develop and continuing to mature those core functions, as well as executing technical work, executing education and workforce development work, and transition and those kinds of things. So we're in the position right now where we're proposing against the new cooperative agreement. We are responding to an RFP from the government. We are the sole organization doing that. This is not a open BAA that is out for competition, if you will. We are building our proposal as we speak. The intention is that this will be a 7-year cooperative agreement. So if you think, we've been at this for basically 7 years. We're almost at the point where we're on our 7th anniversary. This is for an additional 7 years. And this is really opportunity where the government is showing through this cooperative agreement once proposed and then ultimately received, a commitment to the cause and the mission at the Institute, and kind of a recommitment to everything that this entire community has been working on. The budgetary estimate for the agreement is $277 million, with $227 million of it being federal funding, and 50 of that being cost share. So that 227 cost means 227 of federal funding, or opportunity. Again, anyone who's not familiar with this terminology or language, a cooperative agreement in general is an opportunity to put money on contract to execute work. So this is a ceiling against which we can operate. At this point in time, this is by no means a guarantee of award or guarantee that we're going to fill up $277 million worth of activity, but it's an opportunity to do that. We have our previous two cooperative agreements have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 for CA1 and 50 for CA2. So this is a pretty significant jump up and a big opportunity to go after and potentially develop a large program or multiple large programs, do more project calls and identify work that the community needs done. And this is the opportunity, or this really creates a vehicle by which to do that within the government. Another component that is included within this is we're proposing an annual operating budget. So each year, the intention, as this cooperative agreement is documented or structured, there's an expectation that year over year we would put together an annual operating budget. So this is more similar to cooperative agreement or CA1 when we established the Institute, actually applying operational or money against operational tasks. So there's great news in that should lead us to the opportunity where we're looking at every process that we have established, determining, are they right the way they are? Do they need to be modified? Do we need to completely rethink what we're doing? So that's a great opportunity there, as well as potential for funding other activities, whether that's a project call as part of this at some level, the potential to rapidly fund lower dollar projects to test them to see if they are if it makes sense to continue funding them. So within that annual operating budget, we'll be working through each year, depending on where we're at, putting together a budget. The last quick note on the cooperative agreement as a whole is the proposal is due August 5th. So we have a really short turnaround time for the cooperative, or for our proposal rather. And we've relatively recently got this, have been spending quite a bit of time internally working through and critiquing every process that exists within the Institute and running them through the test of, do we need to modify it? Does it need to be refined? Do we need to, completely rethink what we're doing? What are those other areas, core functions that could be provided that we're not currently addressing that we think would be valuable to the community at large? So included, I'll hit on a couple of things as we think through what is in this cooperative agreement, some of the language that is included as requirements. I won't spend a tremendous amount of time doing this, but hopefully it'll just get some folks thinking about ways potentially to get engaged, and that'll lead me to my kind of final point. The Institute, and per the requirements of the RFP, there is an expectation and value as perceived by the government who is establishing this cooperative agreement to continue to strengthen and build out the collaborative ecosystem within America Makes. So all of the work that's done around creating networking opportunities and creating collaboration and building out advisory groups and working groups for the community and the technology, all of that is going to continue taking place. Some of the things that we want to do kind of beyond that then is how do we take better advantage of that, our member community, to better prioritize the needs that come out of them? How do we take that priority and then create a mechanism where we put that into a cycle year over year where we're going off and trying to identify funding opportunities against the needs as identified by our membership. So, that all will continue to happen and mature ultimately from what we're doing today. There is a strong desire to increase the activity within our relationships with the JAM-WIG and the JAM-SIG, so the Joint Additive Manufacturing Working Group and Steering Group, really positioning the Institute as the voice of industry and making sure that we're, understand the needs of the community and representing that properly within the government as we work with them. We're going to continue with tech development or tech advancement, the transition of that technology. So maturing the project call process, potentially exploring different models where we will fund lower dollar, shorter duration projects. I'm very interested in identifying areas where members have ideas that we could work on together that are mutually beneficial. So think Tech Fellow or something like that. So how do we work together to advance the cause that both benefits your organization as well as the community at large? An area where we're looking to, I would say, expand the work that we've done in the past is that in the area of strategic leadership in additive manufacturing. And what we mean by that is, having more forward-looking studies on where is the additive manufacturing industry at today? What do trends look like moving forward? How do we take data and synthesize work that's going on, whether it's internal to our project portfolio or work within the membership, and how do we pull that together into value-added information for the community? How do we get more involved in events that are taking place all over the U.S. and ultimately, potentially internationally as well, to infuse the needs and like requirements that come out of the roadmaps and such of the Institute into other activities that are not necessarily driven by the Institute, but can leverage the work that's been going on here. So, and kind of finally in that space is around standards development and specification codes and things like that, making sure that we're staying on top of that and continue to convene the community around that. And the final piece is around, and by no means the least important, is that of educating the workforce of today and tomorrow. So how do we best position the Institute as a resource for the community? How do we create accessible information and an inventory of assets that any member can take advantage of and help them either get started or mature some component of what they're doing within their business, and build out that entire continuum of activity that's taking place in the education and workforce development space, and understand what offerings exist where. This is not something where we're by any means going to develop our own or lots of our own content, but this is really leveraging the community to take advantage of that and figure out how do we take those activities that are taking place and scale them to the point that we're making a national impact. So those are all things that will be taking place as part of preparation in responding to this next RFP. Ultimately, that will turn into the first year plan of executing year one of the cooperative agreement. The next slide, Joe, please, kind of takes us to, I'll say, the ask, and maybe this is just to get folks thinking. As I mentioned, the RFP is due, the proposal is due August 5th. So we have an extremely tight turnaround time, and that's honestly part of the reason for putting the notice together the way we did. It is, one thing that we need is letters of support. So by that I mean showing from a membership point of view the value that the Institute brings to your organization, to your industry, et cetera, expressing that in some mechanism, via a letter of support. That can include a variety of things, but we need to be able to show, in a sense, the government is showing they're committed to this. They're committed to the technology. They're committed to what we're doing as a community, so much so that they're wanting to, or they're interested in, rather, putting an additional cooperative agreement at an extremely high dollar value in place for us to continue to execute against. So what we need to be able to show is what is the value that this is bringing to membership, having something like this. Obviously, we're all ears on your questions and comments and ideas on how to improve what we're doing. If there's things that you don't think are working, we need to hear about them. If there's things that you would like to help with and feel you could provide value to us as we're executing the mission for the community, we are absolutely interested in hearing that. And we have, we're very interested over the next couple of next couple of weeks, because we're building out our response, but that will continue to go on after that as well. Other things that we're looking for is pledge of cost share, and that can be a variety of things from upfront cost share, where you would identify areas where, whether through software offerings or the potentially offering of fellows to work on particular mutually beneficial activities, or there's a variety of different ways where you may be able to propose putting up cost share that is not specifically tied to a project. We also are interested in understanding that. So this is, much of the cost share that we've received year over year is associated with opportunities that come through Project Call. We absolutely envision this continuing to happen. Obviously, that's a big portion of why the ceiling is so high for this cooperative agreement. We're looking to continue to do a lot of that kind of work. So commitment as it relates to project-based cost share. And then just in general, some project or partnering opportunities. And this is really just to start getting you to think about areas where you may be able to support the Institute or work more closely with the Institute, and that's around technology development. And that may be, a deep focus in an advisory group or a working group. There's a tremendous amount of heavy lifting that gets done within those working groups, and there's a lot more work to be done, and all of that's recognized through cost share and opportunity. And we've had a few folks over the years who have dedicated folks in the form of fellows at some capacity, from quarter time to even full time in some cases. We're very interested in talking through those opportunities with folks. There's opportunities for you to present on the behalf of the Institute, build events out on the behalf of the Institute, et cetera. Many of those same, really all of those same opportunities hold true for education and workforce development. So we have those same kinds of things. And then there's opportunity as it relates to standards development and just your engagement in standards and communications and community, and whether that's putting on, I'd mentioned events a couple of times. There's a lot of opportunities to get engaged, whether they're in sponsorship of events with us, it's working with us to execute things like TRXs that we're, like the one we're putting on next week. That shared cost creates a lot of value to both the Institute and our ability to effectively execute those, as well as the value for membership, and we're able to do them at relatively low cost and still provide a lot of value. So those are just some things to get folks thinking about where we could get engaged. Many folks over the last month have asked where we need help. So these are some ideas to start getting you thinking about where we could use help. So I'll kind of transition to the next slide, Joe, but it really just is the final slide that says, we're absolutely open to discussing this. We're going to be at TRX next week. A large portion of our team is going to be there. We would be happy to talk through different opportunities, any ideas you might have, things that you don't think are working, or ways you think we could mature the approach that we're taking today, and whether that's just something that we take on or we take on together. we are absolutely all ears. So ask now. I talked a little more than I expected, but I would like to answer questions as they come in. So please put any questions you have into the Q&A section. We only have a couple. Sorry to say, it sounds like we had some audio problems as a portion of that call. I don't know if we did or didn't, but so hopefully you heard most of that. So we'll kind of go into questions. If you have questions after the fact, I'll say ask to America Makes info at americamakes.com .us, sorry. And then I'll remind everyone again, but letters of support go to that same email address. So we'll collect those, coordinate them. All questions come in through that same site as well. So, all right, we'll go into questions now.
So in some cases here, John, you have questions regarding how can, here's one, how can companies get engaged with specific projects? I think, through our project calls and other things, but maybe you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so for specific projects that are taking place today and already ongoing, it's the opportunity to get engaged with those really, we have to find an area where the organization who wants to get involved is a fit with the executing organization. And we've been able to do this a number of times in the past. It's ultimately up to the principal investigator, so the lead of the funded organization, to determine if there is a fit where that new, offering organization would be adding value to the team at large. While one of the problems we've had, or reasons that it hasn't worked, I'll say at times when it didn't work, it was because of potential to move the project off of the initial schedule. So, as long as we're able to keep things on schedule, it doesn't affect the budget of the team that has been funded, there's absolutely opportunity. We've had a number of folks who've added on to teams because they've been willing to add their own cost share, effectively either pay for themselves or pay for somebody else to accomplish something that move the entire effort forward. So that's the cleanest way to get engaged in an ongoing project.
So there's a question here, or at least someone looks like they're raising their hand. I would like to participate in the Education and Workforce Development Working Group going forward. So if anyone does have any information like that they would like to raise their hand and be part of a more active engagement as a member, please inform us, and they can respond through that email as well. Yeah,
if you respond to that same email, we can make sure, in this case, we'll make sure this gets forwarded to Josh Kramer, who's the Education and Workforce Development Director, who ultimately sponsors that group, so we can make sure we get you guys connected. But they're in a really interesting phase right now, actually, where they're almost reconfiguring that group, so it'd be a great time to get engaged.
Can you expand on here's a question, John. Can you expand on the RFP for which we are responding? Funding agencies, technical needs, /objective, criteria of evaluation, et cetera.
Yeah, so to some extent, funding agency, the cooperative agreement is through the Air Force.
Yeah, the funding agency basically is remaining the same as the first and second cooperative agreements. So we'll be through Air Force Research Lab, located out of Wright Pat, Ohio.
As far as the technical need in areas there's a laundry list of requirements, is what we're calling them internally here, and most of it aligns directly to points that I'd walk through. So it aligns to development of the ecosystem, developing a lot of this is building the structure and framework that is an institute and the ability to execute against that. So it's developing things like project call, managing projects on time and on schedule, creating a mechanism for members to propose projects against, potential funding, or opportunity for, government to identify funding needs. There's an entire section on strategic leadership, meaning, and some newer things in that space are identified specifically around being able to document the status of the industry, the AM industry, and trends moving forward. So, one thing we've not done at the Institute, we haven't put a lot of energy into looking beyond our project work. So we've spent a lot of energy on executing individual projects, summarizing that project work, making it available, making sure we're sharing it as much as we can with membership and as effective means as possible. But we haven't done a lot around synthesizing information, trying to understand, okay, this is great, but what? Where do we need to go next? Because we did this, what is the next step? And we're being asked to, or as part of the requirements as documented, we're going to expand our scope a little to include those kind of things, be able to look forward to some extent, figure out how to get more folks involved, how to do more long-term planning than we have in the past. So beyond that, there's not, much of the requirements read like the operating plan of the Institute, to some more or less. This is creating the opportunity for us to really go back and look at those and evaluate, is it effective? So some of what we need from the community, and again, we know this is a short turnaround, but feedback on some of the things that we're doing. If there's opportunities to improve or tweak, we are interested in listening for sure.
So there's a couple questions here, John, around sort of specific services. What are your thoughts about American Makes offering a consultancy service for technical implementation?
So I think, that's something where we would want to, I think there's opportunity for us to work with an organization or multiple to figure out what that service offering would look like, whether that's something that would be done in any way through us, or it was just the ability to work together so that you understood or presented you the right opportunities with folks to reach out to. I think we can talk through what that might look like. I don't know that, that in particular, I don't think we're very cautious to make sure we at the Institute are not putting ourselves in the position where we're competing with our members. So if, and this is part of why we don't, make components and do a lot of prototyping or anything like that, because there's a number of folks who do that kind of work and do it very well. So we would not want to take away opportunity from folks within our community who are doing it. So it's something we could absolutely talk about and then explore what the opportunities are.
Is there this is an interesting question, is there a member portal available to get engaged with other members?
At this point in time, not really. But one of the things that is being investigated, and honestly, we're exploring how to launch is, and I know Tiffany, our membership director, couldn't make this call, but there is a member resource, and that's, I guess, what I'll call it now, a member collaboration tool that we're looking to put in place, and that is to honestly accomplish a lot of things, everything from management of the members from our side to the ability to better understand what the capabilities of membership is. We've tried a couple of different approaches. We've put, there's a few folks on our teams who have been spending quite a bit of time looking at this lately. We actually are kind of investigating as part of a project that we're working as well. And we're looking at, part of what the survey that went out recently was intended to collect some information to help us make decisions on where we should go with that. So we would be very interested in talking to you or others about what you think that could and should look like and what the value of that would be. We are definitely exploring it, but at this point in time, we don't have, I can't point you to the spot on the website where you can go see that right now.
Is there, another question, John, is there a better way to let the other members know specifically what our capabilities are? I'm assuming that means a member's capabilities are, so that we can be considered early in the process. I know there's some capability needs, gathering for capability gathering that's happening and will be happening.
Yeah, so I mean that pretty neatly aligns to the previous comment, or at least my interpretation of the previous comment. So one of the things that we're considering as we think about building this tool, or whether it's purchasing or whatever that looks like, it is to understand this and understand how to provide more value to the members to promote their capabilities. There's other ways to do that, and I had it in the text, I think, but didn't show it or didn't talk to it specifically. The TRX webinar series is an opportunity for you to communicate to the rest of membership an area where you're have a particular skill set, et cetera. So there is an opportunity through that. We're looking to very much explore growing that over the years and putting a little more rigor around it and what topic identification looks like, and maybe even calls for topics so that we're providing as much benefit to members as possible.
Another question, will the customer leadership continue to be out of the AFRL Materials and Manufacturing Directorate?
Yes.
Yes, as far as we know now, but like with anything that could potentially change in the future, we just never know. That's obviously up to the government.
Okay, besides TRX events, are there other events that America Makes plans to organize to discuss more details of the task lists mentioned? For example, technology needs, evaluation mechanisms, et cetera. Is there a timeline schedule for implementing new programs and mechanisms?
So that's that is something we're looking at as we think through how to respond to these individual requirements. What are the other things that we could do to, sorry, it just rolled off my screen. What are the other things that we could do to address those kinds of concerns? I think some of it has the potential to happen within our working groups and advisory groups and things like that. I think that's where, we're interested in looking at partnership opportunities where somebody else may be interested in leading an activity, and we would be very happy and interested in supporting, kind of fleshing that idea out and pulling that together outside of the Institute, from, not necessarily an event that we put on, but it's something that we do coordinated with them. So I think we're very much looking at that. We're looking at, you mentioned something to the effect of a cycle. We're emerging everyone as we're building our responses to put together, or evaluate the cadence at which we're doing these kind of things. How do we get ourselves in the position where we know that it's now June, we need to start this process? How are we collecting information on a consistent basis that we're, in position to make the right decisions when the time comes? So I guess the long answer to your question is it's being evaluated as we're looking through our response to these requirements.
One question here is, I think it's pretty straightforward. Is it important for small businesses to offer letters of support?
Yes.
Yeah, it's important for all entity types and sizes to offer letters of support.
There are some specific things that are called out that we will be addressing as part of this, and assuring, or I'll say focusing on getting that community more connected, or not connected, that's not the right way to say it, but making sure we're understanding those needs, working with our, MEPs or whomever the right organization might be to help with that, whether that's us or, with somebody else. So definitely important, but it's important for all organizational types. This is really an opportunity to show the value and need for this kind of community, this public-private partnership to exist.
There's a few questions on here. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to all of these, John. We'll do our best, I'm sure, for everyone listening. There's a couple here that get kind of lengthy. Let's take it a piece at a time. What is MMX doing to tactically address the needs of startups and small players struggling to make it an additive? Before we go in, this is part of a longer question, but
okay. So MMX in particular, we just really dove into planning out what MMX is. With that, there's opportunity to explore what it could be. We have taken the approach over the last couple of years where it is effectively a program update to some extent, and a series of keynote-like presentations, trying to make sure everyone's up to speed on what's going on, make sure we're getting our different partner types connected, and then infusing some technical work in. We've not taken on specific topics like that, which I think it's not that they're special topics, but I think they're, areas that we could put focus on and even have, whether it's a specific panel where we get that part of the community to have a voice, it would be a start. So we would be happy to talk for whomever asks that question, if there is ideas on how to do this more effectively, or I would say start doing it.
One of the things, too, is that we've been allowing non-members to attend MMX to get a flavor for the collaborative model that we express. And I know Tiffany, who's not on the call, often will hold a new member sort of session to help new members understand the various mechanisms to get engaged with other members. So let's keep on going here, John. Is there a question that you see specifically?
No, I had one, but I rolled off and I can't find it now. There we go.
Go ahead if you see something.
There was one up near the top about cost share. I just wanted to make sure it didn't get skipped. Oh, so it says it's becoming more and more difficult for universities to come up with total cost share, the cost share required. Will this be reduced in a new cooperative agreement? So the cost share in general is always dependent on, or is intended to be dependent on I'll say reasonable risk to industry is the term that's typically used, and is something where if there is perceived to be value for those that would be executing the work, then the cost share requirements are typically higher. If it is perceived that the only reason that somebody might be taking on this work in the first place is because of the person funding it has an interest in it, although in a particular university or organization might be the best suited to do it, they wouldn't otherwise do it. Those totals are typically significantly less, and I think we've been doing we've been more focused on that as we've put out calls over the last year or so, for sure. And moving forward, the cost share requirement for this is lower in general than what that has been in the past. Again, though, that will be determined on a project by project basis, and it's something that the sponsor of the activity actually puts in place. But there's, a separate topic, which is where I thought the question was going. There's a lot of opportunity to stay engaged. A lot of the things that I'm talking about around, partnering and, providing value to the community at large is really executed under the, the umbrella of the AT program. So those of you that are familiar with that, hopefully that makes sense. Anyone who's not, there may be opportunities to explore that if need be. But we're absolutely interested in making sure you get credit for the work that's being done, and that can come in a variety of different ways.
I'm going to jump back to the letter of support question, John.
Yep.
We have a question here about what are the most important things you need the letters of support to hit upon? Where can a member add the most value in this effort?
Yeah, I think being able to, first and foremost, if there is something that you're able to provide that is able to be done up front, that is going to add value, that's not directly tied to receiving project dollars, or, if you want to, like, for example, we've had, and I've said it a couple of times, so sorry to harp on it, but, providing a technical fellow for the Institute and a fellow in general, and the way we've used those in the past, they've been put in place to execute particular portions of the mission of the Institute. And obviously, we always scope those out in a way that there's value for the organization putting that resource, whether it's physically at the Institute, which has been done in the past, or if it's someone who's dedicated at some capacity, you fill in the percentage to play a strong role in one of the working groups or in the roadmap advisory group or the education and workforce development group. Our ability to capture that and have those kinds of resources dedicated is extremely powerful because it helps us accomplish a lot more. When we're going through this, and kind of building out a plan against the requirements, you could scope this as large as you can imagine, and we all know that there's not, there is not an infinite amount of money to do this work. So our ability to do this with the community would be powerful if we're able to present those kind of things. But there's a whole host of ways you could present that.
So there's a question here regarding the total dollar amount of proposed funding. Of the $277 million of proposed funding, how much of it will be earmarked as available for 100% or 50% cost share AM projects with its member companies? I don't know that you got into that on the slide earlier, or that we thoroughly understand that question either.
So, if I'm understanding the question correctly, you're asking how of the projects that are possibly being planned, how much are going to require 100% cost share or versus 50% cost share? The answer to that, unfortunately, is we don't know, because as John had said earlier, there could be some projects with zero cost share. There could be some projects with 100% cost share. We really don't have insight into that, so it's kind of hard for us to answer that question specifically. All we know is that it's going to be a range of either no cost share depending on the project or the risk, as John had talked about earlier, up to 100% cost share. So,
and just one last thing, just dissecting that question a little bit more. Of the 277 of proposed funding, just so we're all clear on this, we have not proposed $277 million worth of effort at this point in time. This is establishing a mechanism or a contract vehicle by which funding can get put on contract and could be executed up to that ceiling. And then across that, I guess how that's diversified across, 50% cost share, 25%, zero cost share, 100%, that's purely up to the funding organization to decide. So we don't have a great answer. I just wanted to make sure we're clear that, we're not putting in a proposal in a month that says, this is what we would do if you were to give us $277 million. This is creating a opportunity for us as a group to identify in the future, year over year, where the needs are, what our prioritization is, and then also creates opportunity for us to work with our government partners, et cetera, to explore potential funding opportunities. So there was a comment, or kind of right near the end of a template or I can't remember exactly.
Example letter of support.
So I think we've been talking about that internally. So I think we're looking to put something together. Obviously, it will be something you can, use if you would like and add value or, add additional clarification to or detail, which is what we would encourage. But it's something that we can provide as a reference. It will ultimately be up to, whomever the organization is to put the definition around it. But we can pull something together for next week, and we'll send it out. We know we're basically asking for them to be turned around in 2.5 weeks or less. So we'll get something out next week. Any other?
There was a last question here, sort of carrying on with continuing on with the $227 million, referring to AM overhead. And I realize you may have kind of covered this in your previous answer, John. Did you see the question?
Yeah. So some of the 277 will be AM overhead, while some will be set aside per project. So the number of that 277, the portion that we're proposing annually as an estimate for America Makes operations is somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million. So of that 277, I guess the quick math would be $250 million of it would be for projects. And again, that's, that all depends on where and what that money would be and used for. But a very small portion of what would be put on the cooperative agreement is to run core functions at the Institute. We're about running out of time. I think we had an hour set.
Yeah, we're coming up to 2 minutes before the hour. So if there are questions that we didn't get to, we'll have these questions in the can and we can refer to them. Also, anybody that's on the call, the webinar is being recorded and we will upload it next week to our YouTube page. We can send out an email to let everybody know. So if there's anyone at your organization that will benefit from John's presentation and the Q&A session that followed, certainly you will have a link to share this webinar. And we can follow up with additional questions if we felt like we didn't get these all. Yep,
that's perfect. We'll send for sure out to the folks who registered for this to make sure you have it. When we pull a template together for next week, we'll make sure the intention was to send it to this small group. I'll say the folks that registered and showed, or I guess I'll say registered, and then probably the lead person in each organization. And we're not trying to inundate everyone with this. That's not the intention here. We don't need to. We're not publicizing this too much. This is really about understanding what the needs are of the community and figuring out how to incorporate that as we put our response together. So we'll go through if there's projects that we missed, or excuse me, questions that we missed here, we'll capture them and get those included as well. I'll end with saying, well, first, thanks for everyone's time. Friday afternoon, there's relatively short turnaround time, so I encourage you to start thinking through, ways potentially to get engaged. Any ideas you have, please push those through to info@americamakes.us. Letters will go there. Any comments you have in general. Folks who are going to be at TRX next week, as I mentioned, we'll be there in force. So we'll be happy to talk to you all about this. But really exciting times, exciting that their government's kind of staying committed to this institute in particular. And what we're really looking to do is put together a great proposal so we give them no reason to question that. So appreciate everyone's time, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you. Bye.